Few genres just ooze coolness and manage to stay relevant quite like cyberpunk. I'm willing to bet that this genre's long reach has touched all of you out there during at least one part of your lives. The Matrix, Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, the list goes on and on. But just like The Lord of the Rings defined fantasy, one book stands supreme in shaping cyberpunk: William Gibson's groundbreaking Neuromancer. But here's the strange part. For such a groundbreaking work, there's been surprisingly little from the series in recent years. No tie-ins, no reboots, no movies, almost nothing. So let's jack in and explore the history, legacy, and the question, whatever happened to Neuromancer? Hi everyone, my name is Otto and welcome to Exits Examines. We'll be exploring the lives of people, products, companies, and more after their prime time has seemingly come to an end. If that sounds good to you, there's a like and subscribe button below. So just to get on the same page here, and for the poor souls out there who don't know, cyberpunk is a genre that fuses a cynical punk attitude with dazzling technology, human augmentation, and cybernetics wrapped up nicely in a dismal and often neon-lit dystopian future. In today's world, cyberpunk feels almost commonplace, some might even say cliche. But rewind the clock a few decades and it was completely uncharted territory. The roots of cyberpunk stretch back to the 1960s with works like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, exploring the unsettling intersection of dystopia and technology. However, the genre truly came into its own in the early 80s, and it was a direct rebuttal against the formulaic, optimistic, and often cozy science fiction of the time. While works like Judge Dredd and Ghost in the Shell pushed the boundaries, they were a bit outside the mainstream. It wasn't until the mid-80s that two titans emerged to fundamentally shape the genre. First came Blade Runner, creating a visually stunning world for Western audiences. But then in 1984 arrived the groundbreaking novel Neuromancer by William Gibson. Gibson's gritty depiction of cyberspace, a virtual world accessed through brain implants, resonated with audiences and sparked a wave of cyberpunk across novels, films, and video games, solidifying the genre's place in pop culture and its lasting influence. So to understand how such a seminal and defining work was made, let's take a look at the man behind it, William Gibson.
Cyberspace, a consensual hallucination experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators in every nation, by children being taught mathematical concepts, a graphic representation of data abstracted from the banks of every computer in the human system, unthinkable complexity, lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data, like city lights receding.
While Gibson is frequently praised for essentially predicting the future, I always thought that his visceral and raw writing wrapped his ideas in a very digestible package and never got enough credit. Some of the wording and descriptions are surprisingly poetic and human and really just elevates all the concepts. Now, this isn't a coincidence. Gibson's own life was filled with ups and downs that undoubtedly helped inspire the incredible world of Neuromancer. William Gibson was born as far away from the likes of Night City as possible in a small town in Virginia. His family had to move frequently due to his father's job, which would make him a shy and awkward teenager who would only really find peace reading science fiction. Both of his parents would tragically die when he was young, and he dropped out of high school and began traveling. This would bring him face to face with the counterculture movements of the time, which he would later draw heavy inspiration from. Fleeing the prospect of a possible Vietnam War draft, he moved to Vancouver, where he would eventually marry and settle. Here, he would take up what can only be described as a variety of odd jobs, from managing head shops to thrifting for items to upsell. Eventually, for no other reason than just figuring that it was easier to get good grades to qualify for scholarships than work, he earned a degree in English. Despite this, it was almost by accident that Gibson began to write later in his life. In 1977, facing first-time parenthood and an absolute lack of enthusiasm for anything like career, I found myself dusting off my 12-year-old's interest in science fiction. simultaneously, weird noises were being heard from New York and London. I took punk to be the detonation of some slow-fused projectile buried deep in society's flank a decade earlier, and I took it to be, somehow, a sign. And I began then to write. Gibson's early works, including a notable mention to Burning Chrome, displayed a dark film noir feel and would establish themes, characters, and settings which would culminate in his first novel. Now, writing Neuromancer was a harrowing experience for Gibson. Commissioned to write a full-length novel for the first time ever, he felt like a year just wasn't enough and felt a blind animal terror, as he would describe it. His anxieties grew further when he saw Blade Runner, and he just assumed that everyone would think that he stole that idea. He would go on a grueling revision marathon, rewriting the first two-thirds of the book 12 times, and even then convinced he'd face humiliation when it was finally published. So what's in this darn book that makes it so good? Well, here's a quick rundown with minor spoilers. Neuromancer follows the story of Case, a washed-up computer hacker living in a dystopian future where corporations wield immense power. Case, now probably at his lowest point, was once a skilled cyberspace hacker or cowboy, but he has lost his ability to access the Matrix after double-crossing his employers and now ekes out a living as a drug dealer. His life takes a turn when he meets Molly Millions, a formidable mercenary with razor-sharp cybernetic enhancements. Through Molly, Case is introduced to Armitage, a shadowy figure with his own agenda. Armitage offers to restore Case's access to cyberspace, but at the price of using his hacking skills for a risky mission. As Case digs deeper, he uncovers the existence of a renegade artificial intelligence called Wintermute, who wants to merge with its counterpart Neuromancer to achieve a godlike power. But the real star of the show here is the world building. This is a future that might best be described with the phrase sensory overload. With unregulated capitalism, corporations that are more powerful than states, and a staggering wealth disparity. The world just throbs with this gritty, relentless energy where humanity has become enmeshed with technology. People augment themselves with cybernetics and implants amidst the backdrop of the Matrix, a digital representation of all data in the world visualized as a massive city of geometric shapes on an infinite grid. The physical world in Neuromancer offers a stark contrast to the orderly and rigid Matrix. Gigantic, grimy cities sprawl across entire continents, and Case, our down-and-out protagonist, inhabits a particularly seedy underbelly in Night City. This haven of lawlessness exists solely to accommodate the relentless pursuit of technological advancement, no matter the cost, with cramped and cheap coffin hotels as the only solace. The atmosphere here is thick and all brought to life by some really visceral and evocative writing by Gibson. Here, listen to this.
A year here and he still dreamed of cyberspace, hope fading nightly, all the speed he took, all the turns he'd taken and the corners he'd cut in Night City, and still he'd see the Matrix in his sleep, bright lattices of logic unfolding across that colorless void.
Criticisms do exist, however. Some argue that the characters, particularly Case, lack emotional depth and feel more like archetypes rather than developed individuals. Pacing can also be a hurdle, with the narrative kind of meandering at times, especially in the beginning. But here's the thing, even if you find the writing a bit dry or the characters one-dimensional, Neuromancer deserves recognition for its historical significance. The groundbreaking concepts Gibson introduces and the eerily accurate predictions he made about our technological future are nothing less than incredible. Back in the early 80s, when the internet was still in its infancy, Gibson coined the term Matrix for a visualized online space. He basically envisioned a global communications network years before the World Wide Web, and even invented terms like cyberspace that are now ingrained in our vocabulary. Beyond its prophetic nature, Neuromancer was a genre-defining moment. It defined cyberpunk even if it wasn't the sole founder. The hallmarks of cyberpunk are all here: fractured identities in a profit-driven world, the rise of megacorporations, and the dangers of AI. all found their voice in Neuromancer. The aesthetic and characters too. Molly the Razor Girl and the cyber cowboy Case pulling heist in the backdrop of neon-lit cities. This just all laid the foundation not just for cyberpunk, but a lot of dystopian tropes. Neuromancer was something like the blueprint. Everyone remembers the iconic opening line of Neuromancer, but the final sentence, "He never saw Molly again," is equally impactful in my opinion and perfectly captures the book's tone. Apparently, Gibson deliberately used this line to discourage himself from ever writing a sequel, but ironically, he later revisited the world with Count Zero and Mona Lisa Overdrive. However, unlike Neuromancer's singular focus just from Case's point of view, the sequels embrace a wider perspective, and we meet a pretty diverse cast: mercenaries, former gallery owners, even a Yakuza boss's daughter. These smaller and at times more personal stories really flesh out the universe, and though the plots are distinct, they do link together, and familiar faces do pop up. Corporate power, the rise of AI, and the blurring line between humanity and technology are themes that are explored in the trilogy, and if you like Neuromancer, these sequels are a must-read. They're not only fantastic stories, but showcase the evolution of both Gibson's world-building and the cyberpunk genre itself. Now, it's always been a bit ironic to me that Neuromancer, focusing so much on technology, is actually based in one of the most ancient forms of media, writing. Luckily, because of the popularity of the series, we were able to see glimpses of what this universe would look like in other mediums. I'm willing to bet most of you out there know that Cyberpunk 2077 was inspired by Neuromancer, and they wear this proudly on their sleeve. You can see the inspiration for it pretty much everywhere if you're looking for it. Settings, themes, characters, entire plot points, and in a way it brings the world of Neuromancer to digital life in a jaw-dropping and beautiful way. Cyberpunk 2077 isn't the only one though. Believe it or not, there was actually a Neuromancer video game released in 1988. Developed by Interplay, it shared the novel's themes and locations, but offered a fresh story. While not a direct adaptation, you'll find familiar faces and settings. You play as an unnamed, down-on-his-luck hacker who must unravel a mystery plaguing his fellow cyberspace citizens. Now, the graphics, animations, and sounds haven't aged very gracefully, but the gameplay holds up surprisingly well. There is some backtracking, but the story and atmosphere create a solid cyberpunk experience, and it's worth a try for an enthusiast of the series, especially those looking for a more obscure take on things. Now, despite multiple attempts, a Neuromancer film adaptation has remained elusive. In the early 2000s, collaborations with directors like Chris Cunningham fizzled out. Other directors would take the helm over the years, only to see the project stall again, and the movie seemed perpetually stuck in development hell. A glimmer of hope emerged in 2017 when Deadpool director Tim Miller signed on, but the news has been radio silent since 2019. But for better or worse, adaptations from Gibson's other works do exist. Johnny Mnemonic in 1995 starring Keanu Reeves, and New Rose Hotel in 1998 starring Christopher Walken and William Dafoe. These were truly products of their late 90s times though, and never quite managed to capture the scale and grit of the world of Neuromancer. While a Neuromancer film never materialized, the world got a taste of Gibson's cyberpunk vision through The Matrix. Borrowing heavily from Neuromancer's themes and even its title, even Gibson acknowledged its significance and called it, quote, arguably the ultimate cyberpunk artifact. Although we never got a movie, there's been no shortage of other adaptations, from radio plays to graphic novels, and even an absolutely excellent audiobook version read by Gibson himself, and I gotta say his voice is just perfect for the atmosphere of the book. But hold on to your decks, because after years of failed film adaptations, Neuromancer is finally getting the live-action treatment it deserves. In 2022, rumors swirled that Apple TV was eyeing a Neuromancer series, and this has just been confirmed a few weeks ago. A press release stated it will follow, quote, a damaged, top-rung super hacker named Case who is thrust into a web of digital espionage and high-stakes crime with his partner Molly. Details are still under wraps, including a release date and full cast, but we definitely have something to look forward to, and we can just cross our fingers and hope that it gets the justice it deserves. So, on the book front, will Gibson ever revisit the world of Neuromancer? It honestly seems unlikely, although since the trilogy's conclusion, he's explored similar themes in new works such as 2014's The Peripheral, which was loosely adapted into an Amazon series. While Gibson seems drawn to similar themes, a return to the sprawl appears unlikely, and he's admitted in interviews he has no plans to return to the world of Neuromancer. So, whatever happened to Neuromancer? In recent years, the cyberpunk genre and the book itself have seen a huge resurgence. While the story ended with that haunting final sentence, Gibson's world continued to be fleshed out in the incredible Sprawl trilogy. Even without a direct movie or modern video game adaptation, Neuromancer's influence is undeniable. Games like Cyberpunk 2077 and The Matrix, along with countless others, echo Gibson's ideas still. The pervasiveness of these concepts is a major reason why cyberpunk and dystopian fiction are so popular today, and that's one pretty incredible legacy for any work to have. Until next time, I'm jacking out. Thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciate all my Patreons who make this channel possible. If you want to do more to support me, please consider giving this video a like, and as always, if you ever have suggestions about what you want me to cover next, just drop a comment below. I'm always really interested to know what you have to say. Thanks again, and see you next time.